Today is part two of a four-part leadership series. Today, the subject is building trust and psychological safety. Say that three times fast. And That's a big word for a guy like me. I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can even spell that word, but psychological safety, that's great. You know, Hector, when I was getting ready to sit on a leadership panel or on a panel on Tuesday, 2 days ago, four of us on the panel, a business meeting. I was the guy they brought in on the leadership subject. So I was thinking, man, Hector would be proud of me. I came across this quote as I was preparing some that came from some old notes. Hector, you tell me what you think of this. Willie, I'd like you to chime in on this maybe as well as like, and then I'm going to turn it over to Hector. But it says this: effective leadership is the ultimate key in the business world. It's also the only key that unlocks doors in people's lives. No business, no organization, no department or team can progress and grow without leadership. In the final analysis, leadership from a standpoint of service is the only real advantage one organization has over another in a competitive society.
That is so powerful
Isn't
and
it?
so true. And it's such a nice tie into our topic today, Alan, because it builds off of trust. And when you really break down leadership, the real meaning underneath all those layers that we call leadership is trust. And before I get into my topic today, I want to share a story about trust, and how it impacted me in my journey, to be a leader in my field. And I started, as many of you know, my career with PepsiCo, and I was given an opportunity as a young kid, really coming out of my second year of university. I hadn't even finished university, and was given an opportunity to join PepsiCo in a coordinator position. And this individual, I'll never forget his name. He's moved back to Mexico since then, but his name was Antonio Lee, and I met him in Vancouver. And this guy was such a believer of people that he entrusted on me responsibilities that I was not ready for. Clearly, I was like, a snot-nosed kid coming out of university, and he allowed me to gain insight into really director level type roles that I had no business being in those meetings, but he believed in me to put me in those positions. And that allowed me to have confidence and to trust in myself. And that is what spun this for me. And so I wanted to share, like, unfortunately, this poor guy didn't pan out at Pepsi, and he ended up, unfortunately, being let go. But it was the first day, and I'll share, it's not the only day, but the first day that I closed the doors to my office and had to cry at work. And it was super powerful for me because it connected for me what the impact of a human can do for another human at a business setting. I was down because this guy trusted me. He literally trusted so many people in the organization, and he was amazing at building people. He wasn't so good at, unfortunately, delivering results, which ended up being his undermines. But nonetheless, he was great with people, and that is what the topic today is all about. And it's about trust, right? And it's about psychological safety, because a lot of people think these are soft topics, and so I'm going to get that out of the way now. These are not soft topics. These are certainly not HR topics. So I don't want this to get confused with that. And this is not about lowering your standards because you have to be nicer or, be some sort of politically correct way around people. This is not about PC stuff. This is about performance topics. Okay. This is because if you don't let your people speak up early, guess what shows up late? Problems. Problems will show up late. And if your people don't feel safe telling the truth, guess what, man? You don't have alignment. you have a very strong silent risk of something going sideways in your company and in your team. Because unfortunately, most leaders misunderstand this. They think that psychological safety means being nice. How many times have I heard it from people that they're just trying to be the nice guy at work? Well, man, the nice guy or the nice person doesn't drive results, right? Because they think that by being nice, they will avoid those tough conversations. And they think that by doing so, they're protecting feelings. Well, folks, it doesn't. It doesn't protect feelings. It, in fact, makes them worse down the road because you're giving a false sense of acceptance and a false sense of trust that these behaviors or these outcomes are real. And so, what real psychological safety means is that people feel safe telling the truth without any fear of retaliation, embarrassment, or ego driven action. Because when that exists, execution speeds up. And what I mean by this is like people will hide the reason something went wrong. They'll hide it because they don't feel safe in saying, man, like this process doesn't work. Like, sorry to tell you, Bob, but your process that you've outlined is garbage. It doesn't work. In fact, what it does is it bottlenecks us here and it causes us to miss on that goal or that KPI that you want us to hit. And I'm sorry, folks, but I was out of town this week and I'm losing my voice. So if it starts to crack, I apologize in advance. All right. Patrick Lencioni taught us through his books that the absence of trust is the first and foremost dangerous dysfunction of a team. Now, why do you think that is? Well, because if trust is missing, people hold back. They avoid conflict. They protect themselves, number one, and they don't commit fully, right? And so that's such a key concept because when that happens, the leaders become confused as to where their priorities should be. They'll say to me, and I've heard this, and I'm sure Willie has too, they'll say, man, my people agree in meetings, but then nothing changes. Who's lived that? You go into a meeting, everybody agree, yeah, you got it, yes. You step out of the room, nothing gets done. So then you think like, what happened? I thought we all agreed on this. Well, that's not agreement. That's one of the biggest misconception. That's not agreement. They just agree to you to your face, but behind closed doors, they're like, you're nuts. So what has happened is that you don't have trust because when you have trust, then you get real commitment. So let's talk about that a little bit further, right? I've experienced in my early days where I had that scenario happen to me. And I needed to go back to those people and just say, listen, like you just told me that you agreed. What is it that's preventing you from taking action? And I remember this one person came to me and she said, listen, like I believe that it'll work, but what you're asking us to do will actually add more constraints to this process. And this is the extra work that it's going to add by you asking us to do this. And I'm like, okay, let's break it down. And this all stemmed from a warehouse distribution process that I was trying to implement. I wanted to move some freight located at a certain point because I thought it was a fast mover and I wanted it positioned at a certain point in the warehouse. She's like, by you putting it here, you're actually exposing it to higher traffic that's going to damage that product. It cannot be housed here. I get it. You want it to be moved fast, but the value of that product is a lot greater. It should actually be positioned over here. So you're bottlenecking it. When you put it here, you're adding more costs. We don't agree with you with what you're asking. And I'm like, great. Now, why didn't you say that in the meeting? Like, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say that then? We're like, we didn't want to override you. We think that you're the leader. I'm like, no, that's the last time that I want you to act that way. If you don't agree with what we're implementing, I want you to say it. I want you to talk about it so that we actually like implement what you see, because you're in the front lines. You get it before I get it. They're like, okay, cool. So step one, get people to talk. But importantly, step two is you better be ready to listen when they talk. Because if you aren't listening, it's not going to work. People aren't going to stop. They're going to stop talking, right? So let's talk about listening. So Jocko Wilkins, as you guys know, I love his books. And he says something that most leaders don't want to hear. If people aren't talking, it's because you're not listening. Most leaders think they listen, but what they actually do is wait to respond. So listening is not interrupting, it's not defending your view, it's not explaining your view, and it's certainly not justifying your view. Listening is shutting up long enough to understand what's really happening. That means that you're actually listening and processing what those individuals are saying. Because the people closest to the work, like my previous example, they're the ones that know where the problem really lives. So you should be able to let them explain it. And I'll give you a real life example that we had at Willie's Trucking. Excuse me. In the early turnarounds, I love to go back to our stories because they were so real and they were so powerful, but we had missed expectations. Like I said, we had customer frustrations. We had all these internal operational breakdowns. And the leadership team thought we knew the problem. We literally did. We're like, oh, this is how we're going to fix it. But when we actually slowed things down and we listened to people, we heard from the dispatchers and we heard from drivers that their issue wasn't effort. It wasn't like, yeah, we need to work harder. We need to do this. We need to add more manpower. And we're like, no, it's not about effort. And it wasn't about like any of the attitude. It was unclear priorities and mixed signals, because they would talk to me and they would get one version of what was important. And then they would talk to Willie and then they would get Willie's version of what was important. And then they would talk to the branch manager and then they would get that version of what was important. So we had to stop sending mixed messages. And that's something that people in leadership roles just don't pick up on quickly enough. So it's clear that you have to start listening to the signals and listening to the messaging that we're delivering as teams. So if you're leading multiple teams with multiple people in those teams, you have to make sure your message is clear and understood, right? Because once leaders like stop and actually listen, then they actually get to fix the real issue, right? And that's what we did. We were like, so it's the system. It's because we're all sending mixed messages. We have to be clear about what we mean. Yes, all deliveries are priorities, 100%. But what we're telling you to do is during these time slots, this becomes your priority between this and this. So in our case of delivery at that point, it was between 3 a.m. and 3 and 5 a.m. Your priorities need to be preparing the dock for all the morning deliveries that are about to come in, prepping the dock for activity, right? Your priorities should not be worried about where your pickups are going to come from. That's way later in the day. You should not be worried about who's in the yard. You're only worried about what's on your dock and where is it at on the dock floor. And we became very clear on those instructions for our dock staff so that when the drivers came in, they weren't zigzagging all over the dock floor looking. It was like, I just have to look there. That's where my priority freight is. That's where I need to grab it and load it onto my P&D trucks and go. So, it has only happened because people on our teams felt safe enough to speak about it honestly and tell us what was happening. Sun Tzu said, treat your soldiers as your own sons, and they will follow you to the deepest valleys. Now, what does that mean? That this is not about softness. If you treat your people with respect, but also challenging them, right? And toughing them, they will battle with you with the deepest battles that there are. Because what that creates is loyalty. And loyalty is so critical. And I'll say this, I'll battle with Willie any day of the week, right? I've learned, how Willie thinks, what Willie deems to be a priority, and where he's going with things. And so to me, I connect with it, and I'm like, yeah, let's go battle. Let's go to war together. I'll battle with Willie. And I know that in my time, I've built my generals out there that will also battle with me, you know. And I truly, really believe that that loyalty piece is so critical because it comes from respect. And once you build respect, that's how you build that loyalty. And loyalty builds execution under pressure. Because when things get rough, when tough, when your days are long, when your customers are upset, when your people are feeling that pressure, guess what sticks? It's respect and loyalty. Never fear. Fear does not stick. Fear actually makes people so uncomfortable, they start looking to bolt. And they start looking at where is the grass greener when they're thinking about fear. But when they're thinking about loyalty, when they're thinking about trust, they're like, hey, I know that Willie has my back under this situation. So I'm going to battle through the night. I'm going to battle through this crisis so that we all win together. And that is such a key component because you're not treating your sons with weakness. You're not falsifying their behaviors. You're not feeding a false ego and telling them, you're doing great when they suck. No, you're being honest. And you're saying, listen, Bob, Tom, whomever, pick up your socks. Like, this is going to be a rough one. And I need you to do this. Because if you don't do this, we're all going to fail. And 9 times out of 10, people appreciate that honesty and that message more than a fake ego stroke, right? Because as we talk about appreciation, it's not that false praise inflation. I don't want to hear participation trophies, man. I hate them. I had my kid early on in his soccer camps early on when he was like 5, 6, and all the kids were getting these Tim Horton medals. I never gave him one. I was like, you don't get this. Like, you don't get this. We don't play that game in this house. You earn it and you win it, and then you get that real trophy because that's meaningful. You don't get a trophy for showing up. You get a trophy for actually being the MVP and winning the game, right? And that's the same concept we have to bring to work. Appreciation is reinforcing the behaviors that you want repeated. I don't want people coming in late. I don't want half-ass effort. I want that real effort. I want people showing up and driving results. And that is how you're going to motivate people the right way. If I see you coming in and doing the right things, man, I'm gonna thank you. I'm gonna go above and beyond. I have been known to pay for people's vacations. I have been known to go above and beyond that what needs to be because I want to really praise them. I want to really show them that I value them and that I appreciate them. And I have been known, and I don't hesitate to tell my teammates that, man, I appreciate you. I love you. I love what you're doing here. Right. And that comes from the heart because I really do appreciate it. Now, at the same time, I don't hold back telling them when they need to go, when it's time to, to walk down that plank. Right. I certainly don't shy off of that because to me, it's so important to hit on this. And most leaders miss the mark. They forget that unrecognized effort becomes disengagement. And so they don't focus on engaging people. And that's when they quit. People just quit on them first. People will quit on the leader before they quit on a company. And that is so important for all of us to understand that. Like, if your people are quitting, if they're leaving, you got to look internally like we talked about last week, right? Because they're starting to feel invisible in your organization. And another example that I have for us around the Willys trucking was that during that turnaround, we pushed for higher standards. we pushed for more accountability and more structure. That's how we did it. And at one point, like, people didn't like it. In fact, like, I remember sitting down with Willie. Willie didn't like it at one point. Willie and I had breakfast, and Willie said to me, like, Hector, that's a lot of structure. It feels too stringent. It doesn't give us some flexibility. And there was resistance across there. But what we soon learned was that structure and that accountability was the momentum that we needed, because it raised the standards, right? It motivated others to be a higher output. And that was so powerful for us, because once the leaders started to recognize that process and we started to call out wins, we had thank you cards and shout out moments and gift cards that we were giving, all that acknowledgement of the extra grind and work, it engaged others. It actually became so addictive and like a virus, but a good virus. It spread across the entire organization. And so it was the same pressure. The pressure didn't change across the company. But what changed was the standards. And because the standards rose, the energy was different. The energy in the room was different. And we had such success because of that. And so, I want to address something before we move on here, and that's the misconception that psychological safety does not mean avoiding hard conversations. In fact, it means having them sooner, because when trust exists, feedback happens constantly. I've been in so many organizations where people fear giving feedback. They don't like it. They don't want to do it. In fact, when I joined an organization not too long ago, I heard from one of the leaders, he was like, "We don't discipline here. We don't do that here." And it was shocking to me. I was like, "What? What world do you live in that you don't do that?" And he was like, yeah, that's not how we do that. I'm like, okay, well, no wonder this is in such rough shape. Like, no wonder this is the position that we're in. Because if feedback doesn't happen, how do you know where you have to improve? So I'm of the mindset that honest, open, and genuine conflict, again, open, honest, and genuine, with not ego-minded, right? None of that, is productive. Open, honest is productive conflict. So we want to have that, because as we surface problems early, then we can get to work. One of the coolest things that we do with Willie, and the thing that we teach entrepreneurs, is have an issues list in your business. Put one out there every single week. Talk about what's not working and get to work on that. A lot of companies tuck their issues under the carpet, and that's a cultural thing. They don't ever discuss what's broken, but they all complain about what's broken, but they never discuss it. Well, then how are you going to fix it, folks? Right? If you don't have an active issues list in your business and in your teams today, how are you going to fix what's frustrating you? How are you going to fix what's broken? So we teach this and implement this. And one of my personal, habits or traits that I do is I have a whiteboard in my office. And any of you that work with me or work for me, or will know that I have that whiteboard in my office. And every week I have an issues list of what's not working and where do I need to focus on for that week. And sometimes it goes on for months. Those issues stay there for a long time because they're not solved, but they're on my view. I know what needs to be a priority for me, for my department, and for my folks, right? And so I wanted to make sure that we talked about that, because if you're not addressing issues today, you're not focusing on the right things, and you're not creating the right behavior within your teams. And again, Lindsay had taught us that when healthy teams fight, they debate and they challenge each other, they can't get to a point that they earn respect, and they can do this without ego. So healthy teams can have conflict. They can have honest discussions. We call this synergy. You're pulling with different angles to get you to an outcome that you both are on the same page about. You're all wanting to win. You're just, seeing it from different views. The key to do that is to do it with respect. And again, I'll say that without egos, because when you get egos in the mix, then that's when it becomes super unhealthy and really not something that you want in your business or within your teams. Okay. Another point to make here is when people are quiet, when your rooms are quiet, that should be a red flag. Whenever you ask the question, all right, guys, what's wrong? What can we work on? Nothing. Everything's good. Everything's all good. Oh, really? No, it's not. Start to poke in that, because when people are not telling you something, it's because they're afraid to tell you about it. And that's fear that's holding them back from sharing with you what's happening. It's fear around what that could become, right? They're not feeling comfortable telling you what's going on. So let's talk about how leaders react and why people are holding back telling you that. Because psychological safety lives or dies by how the leaders respond when something goes wrong. You guys ever experienced a leader just lose it and like literally like lose it? I'm not talking about like getting upset and being like, hey, tell me, help me understand why this happened. No, I mean like yelling and getting really dropping F-bombs and calling you like really like that in the room. Does anybody experience that? Yeah, like it's not cool. Like that right there, when your reaction is anger, blame, defensiveness or sarcasm, your people will stop talking naturally. It will happen. They will shut down and they will avoid speaking about that to you again. But if your reaction is calm, is, hey, curiosity, help me understand how did that happen? Like what went wrong? What decisions did you make? What decisions didn't you make? What would you do differently if you had an opportunity to do it all over again? Right? Now we're problem solving. Now we're collaborating. It's not, I'm here to beat you up and I'm here to put blame on you. I want to understand why it went sideways, Bob. That's it. Like, let's talk through it. How did this, like, let's map it out, right? And that will have people coming to you. If you address it this way with emotional discipline, then your team will feed off of that. Like, who has worked for people that are calm under pressure? And who has worked for people that lead with emotional intelligence? Does that not like make you gravitate to them and want to be like them and start to emulate what they do? I've experienced that. I've seen it. And I'm like, man, like I want to be like that guy. That guy over there, man, he's so calm. He's so cool. That's who I want to be like. And that is what I challenge leaders around my teams to be like. Let's be emotional, because you can't be a leader without emotion, right? We got to share what works and we got to inspire. But don't make people feel like crap just for the sake of doing it. We get it. The plan went sideways. I get it. But let's focus on how we fix it, not about putting somebody down. And that's really important for me. So as we talk about this whole leadership piece, right? Think about this and ask yourself this honest question. When someone brings bad news to you, how do you react? How do you respond? What are some of the things that you do? Do people leave the conversations with you feeling clear and supported, or do they leave feeling tense and guarded? Right? If people feel like they can't open up to you, then they will not bring those things to you. And that is when you don't have trust in your teams and in your building. What you have is a hierarchy, and they're just gonna go like, all right, well, I'm gonna go to this other leader instead. I'm gonna go over here because they may be more comfortable for me to talk to. So let's make this practical. And so here's a few trust building behaviors that won't lower your standards at your business, at your job, at your department. First, we're going to ask more questions than you're given. Start with asking more. That's the first step that you want to do. And you want to acknowledge effort. Hey, Bob, I appreciate you tried on that. Like, I think that, You really attempted to go about it the right way. It just seems like it didn't pan out. But let's break that down, right? It's not about, man, like you shit the bed on this. Why? No, like that dude didn't have the intentions to do that. He went in it with the right intentions. It just was a poor plan or poor execution. So you got to figure out what happened and respond calmly to bad news. One of the coolest things that I love about Jocko, and I'm sure if you Google his content, whenever he gets bad news, he always responds to it with good. So and so quit. Good. So and so this happened. Good. We lost this contract. Good. And he answers with good because it gives us an opportunity to learn. That's his response to good because it's good. Now we have an opportunity to learn. So that's the behaviors that don't slow down execution. They actually accelerate it because you're encouraging those continuous improvement, those open and honest conversations. So let's close with this. High performing teams don't run on fear. They run on trust. And psychological safety does not weaken standards. It protects performance. It raises the bar. So if you want faster execution, fewer surprises, and stronger commitment, I encourage that you build trust first. So this week's challenge for everybody listening in is this. You got to listen more. It's exactly that. Listen more than you speak. Thank someone whose effort goes unnoticed. Seek out somebody in your teams that you never recognize, and go say thank you. Thank you for putting in the work. Thank you for being here, for being consistent, for being on time. Just thank somebody that normally doesn't get thanked. And respond calmly next time something goes wrong. Maybe start to use the good theory and just answer with good. Here we go. Opportunity to learn. Because when people feel safe telling you the truth, leaders get better information. And with better information, you get the ability to improve results and get better results as an outcome. So that's what we had for you today. Super excited to get to Q&A and let's go around the room and go through with some learnings from today. So yeah, we'll pass it back to you, Alan.
Absolutely. I'm looking for this, looking forward to this part of the call too. I've been in some pretty, big leadership offices with some pretty high profile leadership people, and I see it from every level. Leadership is one of the most blundered positions and misunderstood positions. Doesn't matter who you are and where you are. So I love the fact that we're talking about these lessons and this subject matter. Willie, I'm looking at Willie, but I'm thinking Hector, so I got to back Hector because Hector, you have never made a liar out of me yet, and you've never let us down. This I think is probably one of your better. If that's the right way to say it. I say, where the rubber meets the road, practical applications, lessons that we've had since we've started. This was a more meat per minute than normal
Oh yeah.
kind of lesson, and I love it. I love it. And you always bring the heat, and the kitchen's getting hot over here. I know that. But so you've left us with a challenge for next week. Is that right? And that is to
Yes.
listen more,
Yep.
to thank someone. And
Yes.
I'm going to assume is the caveat to that, like, don't just blow smoke up their pant leg, but it's got to be authentic and sincere.
It is. And like look out for that one person that generally gets overlooked. you know, that one person that may be just your steady Eddie,
Yeah.
that doesn't get a lot of praise, but like is critical to the standards of your team, that is upholding the standards that you've set, but they're consistent, right? Go thank them, right? And
Yeah.
build that connection.
So then there was a third part of that challenge. So it was listen more, thank someone, and respond calmly, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Stay calm
I,
under it.
I used to fail at all three.
Let's talk about your experience with these, Willie. What are your
Dang it.
takeaways from today's call here?
Oh, it connected so strongly with how you laid this out, where when I made it a shift in leadership was exactly these three things. I had to learn to listen more, calm or respond calmly, and also thanking people. And that's the one that I still struggle to this day. I have to remind myself I need to appreciate people more. And I know you do it so well. I was always admired how you could do a meeting and then point out something that somebody did, and just, yeah, even just a little thing, and how special a person feels when they're getting appreciated for something. And that's the part I'm still working on.
Yeah, no, thanks, Willie. And, it's important because everybody grinds, everybody does hard work and they feel the pressure, right? But a quick shout out. And what I love about our compass structure is that it has embedded in there that headline, right? And that opportunity
Yeah.
to call somebody out for the good stuff that they're doing week in and week out.
Yeah.
And when you started this call, you had me in tears
Yeah.
because what you talked about in your story of someone believing in you, what I instantly thought, that's the reason I have been able to be successful. The people that I had in my life that believed in me, that I could do something more than I ever thought I could do. And it started with my dad first, where he always said, "Oh, you can do this, no problem." Like he would always push me where it was like there was nothing impossible. And driving a tractor at 6 years old, and whatever is the
Wow.
case. I know. And, and my mom would not believe so much in that, where she thought it was very dangerous. But no, my dad said you can do it. And but no, it was that. And then later on in life, it was one of my business partners that always said, "Oh, I know you'll figure it out. You can do it." And I always look back. It was the biggest pivoting points of my life, was somebody believing in me.
Yeah.
And
And I'm a believer in that. And if I come across an individual that, the three pillars, hungry, humble, and smart, and they're an ideal team player, I want to make them believers in themselves. And I think it's so critical for team building and that dynamic because somebody believed in me, just like somebody believed in you, Willie. And
yeah,
I want to pass that torch, right? And that's why we started this because we
that's right.
believe in people. We want to help people, and that's why we started this OBS, team and concept in the inner circle, so that we can help others grow and help others believe in themselves and overcome some of those week to week challenges as a community, right? And so that's what this was all about, and that psychological touch point and building trust. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's cool.